So you started a business, you've seen some success, you got some money in the bank, and now it's time to grow and scale and hire some employees. Training is the most essential aspect. And let me go through the 3 phases of business growth when it comes to training and employees that I've learned over the last decade. Phase number 1 is you're getting to, let's say, $1 million. When you get to $1 million in annual revenue, a lot of that you can do by yourself. You don't need a massive team. You can use freelancers or auxiliary help with it. Maybe you have one employee and they're taking one small task off your plate. But that phase 1 is like, you don't need a whole lot of systems and SOPs and all that stuff in place for redundancy and formalization. You're just getting to the point where it's like a lot of it falls on you. You're doing most of the work, and maybe it's a $500,000 a year industry. It all depends on what your service or your product is, but you're starting to get to that point outside of that where you're going to need to be thinking about what are these systems I have to put in place. With that first employee, when you're at, let's say, 0 to 100 or 200,000, that first employee, the most important aspect is going to be what on your plate right now can you remove that you can pass on to somebody else and have them take that over for you. And you have to train them to do it the way that you want to do it. Just like we said in other videos when it comes to delegating tasks, you have to be very specific and put a training system in place to be able to show them exactly what you want them to do and following up, because you're going to be nervous. You're a business owner. You're doing it yourself. That first employee, you're passing on the torch to say, do these tasks for me. You're going to be checking every aspect of it. But the goal is for them to be taking time off of your plate, not adding more steps to it for you to then approve or refine whatever it is that they're doing for you, whether it's a project manager, office administrator, another person doing what it is that you're doing, design, development, whatever your business is. The purpose of them is to take time off of your plate with that aspect so you can focus it elsewhere. So the best way to do it with that one employee is walk them through exactly what you need them to do, make sure that they understand and be like, hey, do you get this? Yes, I get it. The issues that I ran into in that first phase, they say, do you get this? Yeah, I get it. I put that trust in there, but I find myself going back and just triple, quadruple checking to make sure they did it right. And then I'm just still spending my time. So the easiest way to avoid that in phase 1 is, okay, I want you to do these things. Now recite back to me what it is that I told you to do, or show me before you send this to the person, show it to me to make sure that it's done correctly. Then you build that trust with them. And after 5, 10, 20, 30 times of them doing that, then you can say, yep, you're trained, go on and go forth. You don't have to have a whole lot of formalization. Phase 1 is easy because you're trying to build that business and you just got 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people to help you get there. Where you get into trouble is when you get into phase 2. Phase 2, it's more about structure. When you get into phase 2, you've got either more freelancers, outside help, or you've got a few internal people that are employees. Now, phase 2 is, let's say, maybe it's $500,000 to $1 million or $1 million to $2 million. Now you got to start having some sort of procedures. I'm not saying that you have to go in depth with formal SOPs and systems that are tracking all of the training aspects of it, but you have to have systems and processes in place. So you can start with just the processes. In order for when something new comes into our pipeline, when a new client comes on board, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to have a process of this is how things flow, and you need to document it. If you don't document it, then when you train people, it's going to be verbally training them, and they're not going to be able to have anything to rely back on if they don't have a process. So setting up that process gives you 2 things. Number 1, as you're speaking it and creating it into the process, you're starting to say, how can I make it more efficient? How can I make it more effective? Do I need all of these steps? So you're starting to really dive into the process from a higher level view and see whether or not you need all these steps into it. Because then when you train it to the person, they may ask a question. They may say, what is the thing that I need? Like, do I really need to do all these steps? Because it looks like I could combine these 2, and you're refining the process. So the process can be as simple as a Google Doc walking through the steps. You could go after a system that builds out processes with workflow charts and flow diagrams, stuff like that. But at a minimum, documenting your processes of when these things come in, this is the steps that we take. These are the different situations. These are the different departments, or these are the different people, walking them through the best way to do it, and then having them come back and say, this is how I've done it, reciting back to you, almost like mirroring, and then asking them in a meeting. Weekly meetings with them are great. Probably already going to have them from a standpoint of like the business operations, meeting with them weekly to make sure that there's no issues. but saying like, hey, how would you handle this situation? See if they can recite back that process, or what's our current process for doing this. If they can say it right off the top of your head, then you know that they've retained the information. When it comes to training, retainment of the teachings is most important. The only way for people to retain things is typically to do them. So the more repetitions that you get in the training, the more repetitions in doing the thing that is new to you, the easier it's going to become, the more it's going to become like second nature. So in phase 2, it's about creating those processes. You don't have to worry as much about SOPs or systems, but creating those processes, documenting what it is that you're doing, because now you can scale. Once you document what's worked, what's perfect, then you can bring in more people in the system, and new employee Susie comes in and it's like, hey, this is what you're doing. You're managing our social, you're building our parts, you're managing this team. Whatever it is that they're doing in the business, you say, here's the process that we have. Follow these steps. I'm going to meet back with you to make sure you're retaining the information, and you're going to meet with them on a weekly basis, monthly basis, make sure they understand it, check their work before they submit it outwards. And then from there, you can say this person has retained the information. Phase 3, that's when it gets a little scary as a business owner. So I'm in phase 3 and I've gone through all these phases and they suck. And I kind of learned along the way and consumed some content of people that are smarter than me that have done this before. But phase 3 is when you get into not only processes, but now you're going heavy into systems, heavy into documentation, handbooks, checklists, all these things, because now you got an entire ecosystem. So now you're talking 10, 20, 30 employees and above. You need to have some significant structure. You can even get into, in phase 3, the area of, I'm going to do video training. So people watch a video or consume some content and they make sure that they have a quiz at the end. And that's where you're trying to divide out the time to where it's not a person doing it every time, but it's pre-recorded content. They can consume it at their own pace. Once they consume that content, then it's like, cool, now I'm going to recite it back to you or prove to you that I know this by doing it in front of you or doing a task or taking a quiz. But that's when the system gets bigger. And the best way to do this is to do it piece by piece. So if you created the processes in phase 1 and continue to refine and create new processes as you scale, then you get into phase 2 and you're starting to get into a little bit of the systems, a little bit of the SOPs, a little bit of the more formalized training. Then when you get into phase 3, it's just importing everything into a global system that you have, that all the employees have access to, and making sure that it's easy for them to comprehend, it's easy for them to understand. You can retain the information and make sure that they're tracking it in some area. But if you don't have those checks and balances in place, you're going to explain to somebody how to do something, then they're not going to get it, or they're going to say, yes, I understand it. But if you don't follow up and make sure that they did, then you're going to hinder their ability to do the job correctly. Then you're going to have to go back to the basics at some point. So you got to make sure that if you follow these steps of the 3 different phases, that's the best likelihood for success. Refine and adjust and continue. You're a small business, so you're not going to be like getting stuck in certain areas. You can make adjustments or changes whenever you want. That's the ability that you have as the owner. So you want to build it as simplistic as possible, but easy to comprehend and easy to track and manage. And that is how you're going to train and develop employees and make sure that they are happy in their job and continuing to push that success. So me personally, when I was going through working for other people, the best way for me to comprehend and retain information was by physically doing it. I can watch a video and get 80% of it. I can hear somebody tell me the steps and get 60% of it. But for me personally, I like to physically do it. So tell me to do something, watch a video, then do the task or do whatever it is that I'm learning. And I've learned everything in this entire business that I've created. I had foundational knowledge of things, but I never built it from the ground up. So there's lots of things that I had to learn. The best way for me was to watch a video and do it myself. Now, everybody's different. Some people, you can't tell them to do something or steps. It's not going to register with them. They need to see it written down. That's why when it comes to the training, it has to be video is going to be the easiest and the best, and you have to have some written documentation. But when I was growing up, it was like people would tell me things and I didn't have video to fall back on. So I'd just be like, tell me the steps to do, write it down. Then I'm going to go do those steps and see if I can duplicate it. And if I run into issues, I'm going to come back to you and help you, teach me, mentor me, etc. And once I would do it once or twice, it was locked in infinitely. So you have to figure out with the employees what's the best way for them to learn. And that comes sometimes through trial and error or asking the question. But I've failed so many times if I don't have something to fall back on with like some sort of process or documentation, or especially with checklists, when you have processes that are super lengthy. If you don't have a checklist going through all those steps, you're gonna forget something. There are so many times that I've created content, uploaded stuff, built systems, websites, development, etc., social campaigns. And I'm like, oh, I forgot that one step. And because I forgot that one step, I have to go back 7 steps to fix it. And then I can move forward. So it's like undoing work. I've done that millions of times in the last 25 years that I've been working. So it's best to follow that process in some sort of checklist. So small business owner, you're thinking like, all right, I got to hire somebody. I should go to somebody that I don't have to pay a lot of money to, which is typically your family. You can go down that path. If we look at it versus hiring somebody off the street, here's what I've seen is that with a family member, you're going to be like, oh, they don't know that, but I can teach them. Versus somebody off the street, you might be a little bit more inclined to be like, I want them to come with skill sets. That's going to come with different pay scales, and it's going to come with different timelines. So family members are great, but you got to make sure that that person really jives with your personality, because once you get into business with a family member, if you want to kick them out, that could end that relationship completely. So you got to be careful with friends and family that you bring into business, because at the end of the day, the business has to survive and it has to keep moving forward. And sometimes that means you got to cut out your family member or your best friend if they're not pulling their weight. I've seen that so many times, heard so many stories from people saying, I brought in my brother, I brought in my cousin, I brought in my spouse. They sucked. They weren't good at what they did, and I had to get rid of them, and that severed that relationship. On the flip side, bringing somebody in from the outside, you're going to bring a different perspective, different point of view, different skill sets. They're going to have different experience, and they can bring that into the ecosystem because they may have a different approach to things that you're not thinking about. So it is great to bring in people from the outside and somebody off the streets, but with that comes in, you don't know that person. You have 1, 2, 3 interviews. From there, you're saying, yes, I want to hire them, but they can come with a whole world of different problems. So you got to have a diligent process when you're hiring people to make sure that they go through all the hoops. And if it doesn't work out in the first week, first month, first 90 days, get rid of them and replace them, because otherwise you're going to be stuck with that problem. So when it comes to the pay scale that you put people at, there's going to be some sort of baseline in the industry. So there's like an industry standard based on level of experience, and then you've got your city standard. So you living in Portland, Oregon versus Orlando versus Austin versus Chicago, New York, they all have different scales based on the cost of living. So you have to look at where you live and what's the going rate there. And then from an industry standpoint for that job, what is that person expecting to get? Sometimes you come across a unicorn, they don't have a lot of experience, but they have the skill set, the drive, and the motivation. You can bring them in and what you can afford to pay them, and then they grow as a person with their pay scale as you grow as a business. That's a great situation to be in. Other times, you got to bring somebody in with a significant amount of experience. They're going to come, this is what I was making at my last place. This is what I need to come work here. I come with these skill sets, which from an industry standpoint is great, and they have the accolades and the merits to be able to demand that price. But the best situation is if you can't afford those people that are coming in with like 10, 20 years experience, or you don't want to deal with people that come in with potentially bad habits, you take somebody that has a few years of experience, you pay them what they're worth to you initially, and then you continue to grow and scale them. That's a great thing about building a business is you're building it from the foundation up. So departments get bigger, roles get bigger. You've got managers and team leads and directors and eventually C-suite. And sometimes departments go way horizontal and have different teams and different groups, or different departments get created as you grow. But you have to continue to reward them for the good behavior and the good work, and continue to scale their employment to be able to be competitive in the marketplace. Because the last thing you want to do is lose somebody because of that. So you want to continue to grow and scale, invest all of your money back into the business. Don't go and buy something new and fancy or shiny. Don't divert attention away from the goal, which is to build the brand up. So you want to invest all your money back into the business, giving existing employee raises. As you have new people come in, hire them to balance the workload on your team, focus on that utilization as people get a little bit uncomfortable. Hey, I need to add another team member. It's going to cost me this many dollars because that's what the market shows. Therefore, I have to budget for that. So you want to keep the money in the business so you can continue to reward those employees that are doing the great things and making your business work, and also have room left over to bring in new people. All right, Laura, we're doing a video on training. And since you have, I think, the biggest department here with video production, I want you to walk the audience through how you train your department and any issues that you've dealt with.
I feel like the easiest way to train people is that pretty much any task that they have to do, I know how to do it. And if I don't know how to do it, I make sure that someone who does know how to do it shows them how to do it, basically. So maybe like the first time that someone completes a task, you kind of walk them through it like step by step. Being really available for someone to ask questions. You have to kind of adopt that mindset of like there's no such thing as a stupid question. especially like right off the bat. And then just like really frequent check-ins. For me, I do like a 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day check-in, where at each one there's like clear expectations of what milestones they should be hitting by each one. And so like at 30 days, we check in, have you been hitting these? Okay, 60 days is coming up. I'm gonna be expecting you to hit these, and kind of just seeing if there's any of those that they don't think they're going to be able to hit. Why is that? And like what resources can I give them so that we can get them there?
All right, guys, hopefully you got value out of the content as you continue to grow and scale your business. If you want some more tips and insights into what I've built, make sure to follow me on social media. If you want to hit me up directly, message me on LinkedIn, and I'll see you on the next one.